Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Vegan Conversations with Robert Cheeke on Chef AJ Live. Today, my guest is Nina Jackel, the founder of Lady Freethinker. And Lady Freethinker is a nonprofit organization that aims to end animal suffering. Nina, welcome to the show.
Hi, Robert. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, so that's a pretty broad thing, ending animal suffering. Can you talk more about why you founded Lady Freethinker, some of the campaigns you work on, some of the wins you've had, and some of the upcoming campaigns that are right in front of us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I founded Lady Freethinker in 2013. I can't believe it's been more than 11 years already. And I was working as a journalist at the time. So you know, I've always had this appreciation for media and exposing people to issues they might not otherwise know about, through reporting, which you do and many other wonderful journalists do. At the time, I was actually focusing on nutrition. I'm a certified fitness nutrition specialist, and I was writing a lot about health and diet. And for me, that was a good opportunity to encourage people to eat plant-based, because as you well know, plant-based foods tend to be healthier, and people are healthier overall eating plants. So it sort of naturally fit into what I was doing, but I really wanted to do more than just take on assignments on topics that others were giving me, which was, as a freelance journalist, mainly what I was doing. So I started Lady Freethinker as a blog where I could talk about the things that really mattered most to me. And the issue that I am most passionate about is ending animal cruelty. So Lady Freethinker was a place where I could use my voice to expose animal suffering that a lot of people were unaware of, and encourage people to take action to stop it, as well as make personal decisions that help end animal suffering.
Well, I think you have something in common with a lot of Chef AJ's listeners and viewers, that many of them came to this, if you want to call it a compassionate lifestyle, through nutrition and wellness, and in some cases, fitness. And that seems to be an entry point for a lot of people who then later make this deeper connection with animals. They're already keeping animals off their plate. They're already talking to their friends and family about maybe the benefits of a vegan lifestyle or some of the health experiences they've had or health improvements they've experienced. And so that seems to be something that would resonate with this audience directly. And you started at a pretty young age. Was it 12 years old you became vegetarian? Is that right?
I was 12 years old when I stopped eating meat. I don't remember what it tastes like. That was a long time ago. I won't say how long, but a long time. And it just happened very quickly. I had a dog named Peggy who was, my entire world. She was my best friend. I loved her more than anything. And I just remember sitting one day petting her and looking into her eyes and seeing this intelligence and emotion and all of these things that we associate with humans. And I just thought how much it would hurt me to see pain in those eyes. I'm not sure why I thought that exactly, but it hurt me viscerally inside to think of seeing her suffering. And somehow at that moment, I made this connection that, well, if I didn't want to see her suffering, I didn't want to see other animals suffering either, who also have the same intelligence and emotional capacity. And I just quit cold turkey then, and started cooking my own meals because my parents, as most people's parents do, were well versed in steak and burgers, but not so much vegetarian food. And yeah, from that point on, I never really looked back. At that time, I didn't know about cruelty in other animal agriculture industries. I thought that dairy was fine, the cows are happy, all those myths that we believe, and until we see the reality of what happens there. So, it definitely took a lot longer to transition to plant-based, versus a vegetarian who ate a lot of cheese. But yeah, I mean, I I always consider that an important part of who I am. I think my diet has always been tied to my identity and my beliefs, since that age.
Yeah, can I ask how you made that leap from considering the welfare of dogs, or your particular dog in particular, to other animals? And I say that because, for example, I grew up on a farm. I spent 20 years living on a farm. I became vegan as a teenager, a little bit older than you. I was 15. But for me, it was not only did we have dogs and cats, but we had like 20 other different species. We had cows and goats and chickens and turkeys and geese and ducks and rabbits and guinea pigs and horses and ponies. And so for me, I made that connection fairly easily because I saw all these other farm animals every single day. And so it wasn't too big of a stretch for me to say, okay, that this dog has their own interest to live a life free of fear, pain, and suffering, but so does this baby calf, so does this chicken, so does this goose or turkey. But I realized that not everyone grew up on farms. Especially our age or in our area. I'm sure I'm older than you, but maybe our parents or our parents' parents, they grew up on farms because that was more common. So how did you make that connection from pets to animals that are often considered food, to give them consideration?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I was definitely a city slicker. I'm from New York originally, and I was living in Southern California at the time, in an urban environment. So it definitely wasn't firsthand experience. I think it was almost intuition. Honestly, it just made sense to me that if this animal experiences these emotions and has these cognitive abilities and this depth in their eyes, then it just made sense to me that other animals probably did too. And when you start thinking about animals in that way, eating them is just not appealing anymore. And meat just became something repulsive and not food to me. And I'm thankful because I know that it's not always easy for people to stop eating meat. It wasn't as easy to stop eating cheese. I'll say it. I know that it can be a struggle, and so I do feel fortunate that there was that repulsion that I think helped. I also think when you make those changes when you're younger, it's a little bit easier because you have fewer years of habit built in, and when you're younger, it's just easier to do new things and make major life changes. You just don't really think about it as much, I suppose. But yeah, whatever it was, I just could see that there really is no difference in mental ability or experience between a dog and a pig or a cow, and they just stopped being food.
Yeah, I agree, and I experienced that myself as well, and being kind of, when people ask, like, but aren't you tempted? No, I'm repulsed by it. Like I hold my breath when I walk past the meat aisle in the grocery stores.
Uh-huh,
So I totally get
exactly.
it. So what was your? We're going to get into Lady Freethinker and campaigns and all that, but I'm still really interested in your background. I think a lot of listeners are too. I mean, Chef AJ has a big audience here, hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. I've been on the show many times. I know her audience pretty well. A lot of people are new to this lifestyle too. And I'm just curious what your support system was like at that age, because many people listening have children who are considering going plant-based. There's some young listeners tuning in as well. Um, were your parents supportive, or did you have a kind of a social group at the time in school, or were you kind of on your own and like in this isolated as a vegan in your family trying to make it?
Um, there was no support structure. I think actually part of the appeal was that it was a rebellious thing to do, to be honest. I mean, my parents were always accepting of it, and I'm grateful for that. They were never trying to force me to, you know, to eat a burger, or a hot dog, or anything. But no, it was really, um, an isolated decision, and I guess one of the ways that as a preteen and teen, I expressed myself, to be honest.
Yeah, I have again, similar experience. It was a little bit rebellious, being a farm kid and kind of going against
Yeah. I
tradition.
bet.
I was in 4-H. I was raising animals for food. I sold them at the auction,
Wow.
and I said, not doing this anymore. And I started doing a lot of things. I dyed my hair different colors. I dressed differently.
Uh-huh.
I use it as a area of self-expression, as well as I'm a different individual now. Um,
Hmm.
so let's fast forward a little bit here. So you're the founder of Lady Freethinker, 11 years ago now, right?
Hmm.
So tell us about that journey. One, I'm really interested in what it's like to be a founder, like what it's like to create an organization, and whether that's easy or hard or challenging, or how
Oh,
you
it's challenging.
how you
I
build a team. I can imagine how you build a team. What kind of, if you have to go out and recruit, startup funding, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people listening are kind of interested how they can get involved. So I'm kind of interested in the early days, what it was like starting an organization and what you hope to accomplish, and
Mhm.
to kind of walk us along that journey of what you have accomplished, and bring us up to date with some of the campaigns you're working on right now, including some of the topics of this show, of like Fashion Week and fur
Mhm.
trade and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I started out, I actually did not have a clear vision of becoming a nonprofit organization with a staff and all those things. I honestly didn't even know if that was possible, or, hadn't thought about it being a possibility. Um, it started really just as a personal blog. But then what happened is the more I started, researching for things that I was writing and actually taking on jobs for more animal protection organizations, I got introduced into this world of activism that I honestly didn't know existed when I first started the blog. And it took, maybe a year or two to really open up that world. And there's so many organizations that were doing these investigations, actually sending people into animal facilities and documenting what they found and posting the videos online, publishing petitions, lobbying, calling for change. And the more that I got exposed to that, the more I, slowly, over a year or two, realized that I wanted to do more than just have a blog. And so in 2015, I filed for 501(c)(3) status, which is basically just approval from the IRS saying that you are a charitable organization, and then you can start donating and all those fun things, or start fundraising. I mean, at that time, it's not that funds were coming in, people were not lining up to give me money. It was extremely challenging, and I put tens of thousands of dollars into my own money into this, and then one day people did start to donate, and then more people started to donate, and the more the audience grew, the more donations come in. And we weren't getting huge grants from foundations. These were really just a lot of small donations from people who cared about these issues. And I'm very fortunate that we found an audience of people who do care. And I would say starting from 2017 to until now, we have grown very much. So now I do have people who work for Lady Freethinker. I can help take on, the work that I was somehow all doing myself at some point. I still don't know how, because I don't know what I would do without the people who work for Lady Freethinker today. Um, but I do consider myself extremely fortunate that I was able to create something that allows me to follow my passion in life, and also employ others who can do the same thing through the organization. Um, it's incredibly challenging, working night and day on, you have to think about everything from, tax forms to, fundraising to HR law. And then, you're doing the campaigns full time, all the while. So yeah, it's a lot. But I do believe that if you're really passionate about doing it and you have an entrepreneurial spirit, I think it's worthwhile. And I mean, a nonprofit is a business. It is. So if you just want to be an activist, I would recommend going to a local nonprofit or even an international nonprofit and volunteering or even getting a job, because there are some great jobs in the nonprofit industry. And you can make a big difference as a part of another organization without the extreme labor and risk and all those things involved with starting your own. Some people are entrepreneurs, and, I would say if you want to be an entrepreneur, consider being a nonprofit entrepreneur as a viable thing to do. You don't have to start a for-profit business if you want to really focus on something that you believe in. That said, you have to have a very specific mission and something that you are offering, because no matter how much you love animals, unless you're doing something actively that's a little bit different than how everybody else is doing it, you might not have a nonprofit model. You might, be an amazing activist, and we need those too. So it's not for everybody, but I mean, I love what I do every day. I absolutely do.
Well,
Um,
oh, please go ahead.
oh yeah, no, I was gonna jump into campaigns, but if you had a
Well,
question, go
yeah,
for it.
let me interject here because I've been taking some notes here. I love some of the stuff that you said. I want to just kind of expand on that. So I love that you expressed or admitted or revealed that it's not for everyone to be to create your own organization. You have to be built for it, and I know that from personal experience. I can tell you right now, Nina, there's a difference between you and I. I am not built for it. I'm not. I need to work for somebody else. I've tried creating some of my own, even for-profit brands over the decades of being a vegan advocate. It just hasn't worked for me. I just don't have it. Whatever it is. There's certain people that have it.
Insanity? I don't know.
Whatever it is, some people have it, some people don't. I don't have it. So, kudos to you and those who are entrepreneurial who do have it. I want to ask you, how important is it to do meaningful work? You mentioned the word passion a couple times. You mentioned loving what you do a couple times. You mentioned being able to hire a staff that loves what they do. In your experience, including being a founder, how important is it to do what you would describe as meaningful work?
Well, for me, it's everything, to be honest. It's everything. There's absolutely nothing else in this life that I could imagine myself doing. You know, Helping animals is just what I breathe and eat and sleep, and it's what I hate to say meant that I meant to do, because there's a lot, that's a loaded thing to say, but it for me it is my being. It's everything that I am. And if I did have to do less meaningful work to earn a living at some point, I would still pursue this in some way.
Yeah, I get that, and I also want to bring up the point you talked about raising funds and donating and all of that, and I have a new book coming out, The Impactful Vegan, in a few months, and one of the things I write about is that donating to effective organizations is one of the most effective and impactful things that we can do, often even more than our actions, because
Mhm.
most of us, or at least I would say many of us, don't have the skills, talents, resources, and those kind of things to go lobby and create massive change. But we can support organizations that specialize in doing that. Like, that's what those organizations do. So I think it is very, very important to be conscious about where we donate our resources, and how we volunteer and how we support. So we're going to go into it in a little bit later. But if someone wanted to donate to Lady Freethinker, how would they do that?
Well, there's a donate button right on our website, ladyfreethinker.org. We do make it easy. I will say if you are thinking about starting a nonprofit, make it as easy as possible to accept donations. It sounds obvious, but you're not always thinking that way. So yeah, just a donate button right there on the homepage. It's simple.
Yeah, and you're working on some important campaigns. We're going to be talking about Fashion Week, uh, but maybe rewind a little bit and talk about. So you're trying to, or aiming to, or working toward reducing animal suffering, reducing cruelty. Where did you start? In when you first got that? Was it 2017? You started getting funding? Is that around the time frame?
That was when I quit my day job and had barely enough funding to have a viable organization.
When
Yeah,
you went all, like your all in moment, really?
that was when I was all in. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just do this, and if in 6 months this doesn't work out, I go get another job. And thankfully, I didn't have to. But yeah, I mean, and it was really my second job at that time anyway. I was putting in the hours and the funds myself. But yeah, 2017 is when I would say it became a financially sustainable organization.
So what were some of those first issues that you tackled as far as your advocacy work? What was like the, right out of the gate? Okay, we got the funding, and now this is the direction we're going to go in. And how did you make that decision?
So, as a journalist, my mission with Lady Freethinker was really to be a media organization to expose animal suffering. And it was less a specific issue than continually publishing articles and actions to help animals in some of the worst situations. And that really involves everything from domestic abuse cases where somebody, kills or mutilates or just, beats the hell out of a dog, and you want police and prosecution to take that seriously. So you speak out about it, you get other people to speak out and raise awareness that way, or larger issues, whether those issues are the dog meat trade in Asia, which is an issue that we've done a lot of work on, um, cruelty in factory farming, obviously here in the US, that's a huge issue. And really, it was a very constant and continuous push to get the word out about what is happening to animals. And it actually included and still includes amplifying the work that other nonprofits are doing. And I think that's one thing that sets Lady Freethinker apart as a media focused organization, is that we're really covering what other activists are doing and other organizations, even though they might technically be our competition. We want to get the word out about, their latest investigation into a dairy farm or whatever it is, because that helps further our own goal and mission of helping end animal suffering. And I think, that was one thing that made us unique, that people who really care about animals appreciated. And we just created and still create a lot of content and just push it out there to as wide an audience as possible.
Well, that's great to hear, Nina. And um, also, you may be well familiar with Phonalytics data and survey research that shows that publishing articles, sharing news media, is one of the most effective ways to have an influence on non-vegans, to invoke that compassion within them, or to what Phonalytics will say is get them to change their behavior. So not just the way they think, but how they act. So it sounds like you, whether knowingly at the time or not, landed upon what the research and data suggests is the most effective ways to get people to change their behavior. It's through news, and it's through media, and it's through articles. And these are things that it was news article that first impacted Earthling Ed. When he learned about the truck carrying the chickens that crashed and killed 1,500 upon impact and had 7,000 on board on a massive truck in the UK. And he had chickens from KFC in his refrigerator at the time. But that was the catalyst. And now he's one of the biggest voices
Wow.
in
Oh,
the
he's
community.
amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that story, but no, I'm
Yeah,
interested.
it started with a news story that got him thinking. I mean, that juxtaposition in that moment, being sad about chickens he watched on TV, heard about crashing uh, and dying on impact, and then the chickens in his refrigerator. And that was the thing that inspired the change within him. And so many of us have a similar story. So it sounds like you landed on what the data suggests is the most effective as far as the cause that you and I care about. I want to ask you what has resonated with your readers and viewers the most as far as different types of stories you've shared, different areas, farmed animals,
Yeah,
other types of animals, vivisection, whatever. What's really connected?
yeah. So our largest campaign right now, and what has been for the past few years actually, is ending animal cruelty on social media. There's a very surprising number of videos of animals being tortured in horrendous ways. And, we're not talking about ambiguous cruelty, but, mutilations, beatings, killing, things like that. And it's posted on social media for various reasons. Um, Sometimes people enjoy watching animals harmed. Other times they're for fake rescues in which somebody, pretends to actually be a rescuer and kind of goes in and, saves the animal that they put in harm's way in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's a massive problem, and it's also a very difficult one to crack because it involves getting social media companies, I mean, these giant corporations, to not just change their policies, but also to enforce their existing policies that prohibit this content in the first place. In 2021, we actually sued YouTube for failing to remove this content that we were repeatedly exposing. And, we compiled multiple reports and got media attention and all these things in major outlets, from The Guardian to Newsweek, and they still just weren't doing enough, and weren't even receptive to having a conversation about the problem where we could have proactively helped them identify this content and remove it and stop it from being posted. There was just no response. So ultimately, a lawsuit was really the last option. Um, and lawsuits do take a long time, so that is still it's still pending. It was actually dismissed by a lower court, and we filed an appeal. Obviously going against a company of that size, YouTube is owned by Google, is owned by Alphabet. It's a huge, huge company, and they have some good lawyers. But we also have very good lawyers and a very strong case. So we're awaiting our next hearing date on that. But beyond that, there are other platforms. Facebook right now has a huge problem, particularly with baby monkey torture. And there's this group, multiple groups really, who just for some reason enjoy watching baby monkeys tormented, and specifically long-tailed macaques. They're very human-like, which is something that these people comment on frequently. And they actually pay people with access to monkeys. Like, these are people in the United States and the UK who are paying people in Indonesia, or other countries where they have access to these macaques to create these custom torture videos, which I will not describe. Um, and so it's been ongoing. That's been an effort not just with social media companies, but also with law enforcement. And thankfully, there have been prosecutions, and I do hope to see many more soon. But I would say that animal cruelty on social media and, for video content is our top campaign right now.
I'm really glad you shared that, Nina, because I wasn't actually even really aware of that, like fully aware that there are these deliberate ongoing things. I've seen some uncomfortable stuff where it kind of like you described, where it's clearly a setup where there looks like there's someone's being a hero, or in this case, I saw one again, just to briefly describe it, uh, a mother hen with baby chicks in like a cave with a cobra snake.
Yeah,
And she's
yeah. That's
flying
a
up the
common
boulevard,
one.
and people are commenting like, "Go mother hen," and mother always wins, and all this. But who's filming that? And
Exactly.
how did this situation get there in the first place?
Exactly.
Your first instinct is like, as a viewer, is kind of like, well, this is first alarming, but two, like you're cheering for the hen, but then you have to stop for a second, dismiss all the comments of like,
Mhm.
this hen's a hero, and realize how the heck did she get in this situation in the first place, and
Right.
realize that someone is behind this, and they're filming it, and they're not helping or intervening or whatever the case is.
Exactly.
And then unfortunately, I mean, I use social media, I guess, as much as the next person. I have a love-hate relationship with it. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
when you click on something, you get similar things like that. Then you get the
Yep.
mongoose fighting the crocodile, and then it's like you got to stay away from that stuff, block it, not click on it, whatever. And I didn't realize that there were individuals or organizations that are like basically selling this kind of opportunity to torture monkeys or put animals in harm's way, or let's watch what
Yeah.
happens when an alligator gets
Individuals more than organizations. Sometimes they'll have a sort of generic name that indicates they might be a rescuer, but they're not. And when you really start looking and paying attention to the details, it becomes obvious which are real and which are fake. The challenge becomes getting social media platforms to discern. And of course, we don't want them to start removing undercover investigations into actual animal cruelty. And to be honest, right now, I don't think that they really know the difference in many situations. The ones with the snakes, they've declined actually since we started exposing them. That National Geographic article focused specifically on those staged predator attacks. Often it's a python, sometimes it's a Komodo dragon or an eagle, and it's pretty obvious that these predatory animals are also captive. They're not just wild animals, and there are signs like the time of day isn't when they would normally be hunting. When the human does come in and intervene, the snake just sort of lets them uncoil, them from the body of the puppy or chicken or whatever it is. As you said, the cinematic style, like, well, somebody's just there kind of filming it happen, and the odds of just stumbling upon something like that in the wild are so minuscule.
yeah, get out for a walk, and here's what I saw today.
Exactly. And, I just happen to have my camera and
Right. Right. And you
no.
go, you hear, it's
Yeah,
almost like you
right.
hear the word, okay, 3, 2, 1, record.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the snake ones have been removed, but shockingly, a lot of them are still up. And it's a little bit crazy because it's general knowledge now to the social media platforms that this specific video, the python attack on the small animal, is staged. It's always in like a dirt cave, like you mentioned, and so many of them have been removed. And often, when we send our lists to various platforms and we send lists of those, they do get removed. But when you search, you can still find them. And they come up with like new sort of ways, like they start using different keywords, or they start filming them a little bit differently, or they pretend to have an address for the organization, but like it's obviously not where they really are. Or they'll like post a website, but then you click on it and it just goes to a dead page, but like they're trying to add little signs that they're legitimate, even though they're not. They're just constantly coming up with new tricks and in ways to get this content up because they can profit from it. And unfortunately, the social media companies are profiting from it too. So it's really a conflict of interest because we're asking them to eat into their own profits by removing abusive videos. And I'm not gonna speculate, but you put two and two together, they just don't really have a lot of incentive to remove this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. And then you just beautifully said it, that um, that our reward system, the reward system in social media is that the more views, the more attention, the more profit, the more all that stuff, the more clicks, the more
Right.
profit, the better algorithm, all that stuff. And so they would have to go against their own personal interests.
Exactly.
That's where
Yeah.
a lot of controversial stuff, even um, podcast episodes that are on YouTube that are really controversial. They're just the reward mechanism that you get tens of millions of views or hundreds of
Yes.
millions of views in a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to turn away from that. All the powers that be, if you will, they don't want
Right.
to turn away from that. That's incredible. Basically, one of the things I heard many years ago was that from a serial entrepreneur, Gary Vaynerchuk, that attention is the greatest currency. If you have someone's attention, you can sell them whatever it is you're selling. All you need is their attention. If you can
Okay.
capture as many eyeballs as possible, you've got power. And that's from whether it's Mr. Beast or the biggest YouTubers in the world to Joe Rogan and those who just
Yeah.
landed a $250 million contract on top of
Wow.
his original $100 million contract. A lot of this controversial stuff brings views, and that's
Yeah, it does. It does.
unfortunately problematic because of the reward mechanism. So I already had a predetermined question. You answered it to some degree, including the stuff that I didn't know about with these animal cruelty videos. But I was just going to say, what are some things that most people don't know about certain issues, like whether
Um,
it's Fashion Week or fur, or like you mentioned a dog trade in Asia,
yeah.
not just Korea, it's in Thailand too, right, or some other places.
It's actually in a few different countries. China is the largest, slaughter of dogs and cats, and that's really because they're so big. I don't know if per capita they're the largest, but there are a lot of people in China. But it does also happen in Vietnam, and in Cambodia. South Korea just passed legislation to ban it, which is fantastic. A lot of people worked on that issue for a very long time. Organizations around the world, including mine. I actually visited South Korea and investigated a dog meat farm there, and it was, one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, if not the hardest. And I obviously I don't believe in torturing and slaughtering any animals, in factory farming right here in the US, or dogs anywhere else. But it is, it is heartbreaking, and I'm very glad to see that South Korea is phasing that out. And Thailand actually did already ban it a few years back, which is great. And hopefully some other countries will follow suit. Um, yeah, okay. So what people don't know, I know we were going to talk about the fur investigation, and just a general note on animal products in fashion. I think very often people purchase items that come from some type of animal cruelty without really knowing it. When you look at just the sheer volume of products that are made from animals, whether it's down pillows, cashmere sweaters, leather shoes, it's just sort of overwhelming, and you have to really try not to purchase products made from animals. So I think a lot of people really just unintentionally, oh, that's a cute bag, that's, it's got a little furry pom pom on it, or a keychain, a little pom pom keychain. You don't really think about, well, that might be, real fur, and often it is. I think, a lot of people sort of don't want to support animal cruelty, but um, just don't really understand like how much stuff out there is, from these industries. So it's just something to be vigilant about. I'm a pillow connoisseur. Like, pillows are my thing. I'm very picky. I'm very picky about pillows. And I have the hardest time finding nice pillows that are not made out of down. And it sucks because I don't want to support this industry. I know that, birds are live plucked. I mean, could you imagine, being a little bird and somebody's ripping the feathers out of you? It's horrible. It's horrible. But it's very hard to find, mid-quality pillows that are not made of down. So I do a lot of searching. Like, I spent so many hours reading reviews and this and that. And I have found some great ones. I have. So they're out there. It's possible. But, the average person is not going to put that much effort into it, and they're just going to buy the down pillow, right? So, I would encourage people to, be a little more aware. The company store, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention brands, but the company
Mention
store
anything
has
you
a very
like.
good down pillow.
You can shout out any brands that you like. There's
Okay. Okay.
no
Yeah, I
problem.
like their down alternative. Great
Yeah.
down alternative comforters too. That's another thing. A lot of comforters are made from down, like the warmest ones especially. But yeah, the company store, great down alternative.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, and I wrote this down too, for people just to remember this sentence, not to feel bad or to feel guilty, but just remember that we support animal cruelty without knowing it in a lot of things that we do. And what basically all that means, or not all that it means, but one thing that it means is that we just be cognizant of that we just be reflective on that, and we just, like you said, a lot of people may not think twice about buying a pillow or buying a certain garment or a certain a piece of clothing, regardless of whether it was sweatshop labor made or whether it was sustainably sourced or whether it has animal cruelty attached to it. We often think, it's very easy for us, I think, for most of us to think, okay, leather shoes, leather belt, leather wallet, let's avoid those.
Yeah.
But how much cruelty is involved in so many other aspects of our personal fashion or lifestyle. Little things we can do. We can obviously avoid leather seats in cars when we purchase them and reduce supply and demand in that. We can buy cruelty-free cosmetics. We can use cruelty-free deodorants, toothpaste, soaps, shampoos, conditioners, all that kind of stuff. We can look for products that are not tested on animals before we decide to make a purchase. What are some other things that we can do, or resources that we can use to become aware of this inherent cruelty that many of us support without actually knowing that we support it?
Yeah, I mean, there are some great online resources. Um, I know PETA has great lists of products that you can buy, beauty products as well as fashion brands that are cruelty free. Um, and sometimes it's as easy as just adding vegan in your search term, or whatever you don't want in there, like down alternative. Instead of just searching for pillows, search for down alternative pillows, and then you'll see all those options. And you won't be forced to kind of sift through all the things that you don't want to find the ones that you do. It really can be as simple as just being aware in that moment when you're about to make a purchase that there's potential here for animal cruelty to be involved, and just taking that extra step by either looking at a guide, resource online, or really just by using a search term in Google, or whatever store that you're shopping at, to weed out the cruel stuff.
Yeah, and I think also perhaps just taking a moment to think about it. Maybe as simple as, okay, I'm buying this, I'm in a hurry, my kids are making noise in the grocery store, we got to get out of here, or I'm late for something, or I got to get home, make dinner, I'm buying groceries, okay, here's some peanut butter. But maybe taking a look to see if it has palm oil in it that's not ethically sourced, that's going to affect orangutans, this kind of things. um, just taking a moment, I think. uh, don't animals deserve that we can take a few seconds to look at an ingredient list, whether it's a medication at a counter that has milk products in it or something else, and decide that there's an alternative there. We can get the one that doesn't have that in it, or get the bread that doesn't have milk in it, or doesn't have dairy in it, or that
Or
doesn't
the
have.
gelatin. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but the gelatin, I don't know if everybody understands that gelatin is an animal product, but it is, and unfortunately it's used in medicines as well as foods. Like marshmallows. You wouldn't think that marshmallows are cruel, but yeah, they have gelatin. But they have some amazing vegan marshmallows.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
do.
Dandy's is a great
Yeah,
brand. And
Danny's.
by the
Yeah.
way, you can cut me off anytime. Sometimes
Okay.
my long explanations, but you're right. Gelatin, animal bones, skin, and tendons. It's in millions of pieces, billions of pieces of Halloween candy every year, around the world, or around, wherever people celebrate. And also all year long. And things like, we just had Valentine's Day. We've got
Yeah.
Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these things coming up. These holidays where we can just pick the dark chocolate, you know,
And I
or
love dark
or
chocolate.
whatever.
Oh, so
Right?
much better anyway.
Yeah, we can just make these conscious decisions. And I know it's an inconvenience for many of you listening to just pause for a few moments and say, yeah, what suffering might be attached to this purchase? But I think it's worth it. I think animals deserve that we can pause for a few moments and say, you know what, I'm going to grab the dark chocolate instead of the milk chocolate. Or I'm going to buy this plant-based cheese, even though my kids don't like it quite as much as dairy-based cheese because they've been having dairy-based cheese their entire life. Sounds like you struggled with that for a while.
Huge struggle. Yeah.
Right. But I guess I just keep coming back to don't they deserve at least a few moments of consideration? And I would argue that they do. So I think I'm glad you brought that point up, that there is inherent cruelty and suffering, even if we don't want to think about it. It's there outside of, you know, fur coats and leather shoes and all that. But speaking of fur, it's one of the things we put in the description of the show today, and we waited 80% of the way through the show before we really dive in.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I'm not a fashion expert. I got nice flowers I'm rocking today.
It looks fashionable to me.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I know nothing about Fashion Week except for that it's in like New York City, Paris, Milan, whatever, on a quick search before talking to you today. So I know nothing about it. But it's happening in major cities for the next month, different city every week for the next month. What's going on in Fashion Week involving cruelty, and how can we contribute to reducing that suffering?
Well, fur sadly is still a major part of many fashion weeks. Fashion week just ended in New York. It started last Friday, ran through Wednesday, and then, as you said, there are more around the world that are coming up. And unfortunately, fur is still a part of most of these big cities' fashion weeks, and it's sort of shocking. First of all, most major designers have stopped using it, which is fantastic. It used to be much more common than it is, but it is still out there. And so Lady Freethinker just released an investigation in partnership with Paws of China, a local organization in China, to document a fur farm and expose what happens. And what we found, I mean, it was appalling. There were foxes and raccoon dogs, and they're just kept in these barren cages, tiny, filthy cages for their entire lives. They pace back and forth. They show, other signs of deep psychological distress from such tight confinement for their whole lives. I mean, these are wild animals. They naturally would be running around, and they're just kept confined in such tight spaces. But then, their lives are cut very, very short, and they're treated brutally as they're dragged from those cages by iron tongs and, clubbed and then skinned. And what we documented were many animals still moving as they were being skinned. There was one fox that continued to blink for 5 minutes after they had been skinned. I mean, like, the footage, we couldn't release all of it because it's just too gruesome. And watching it was not fun. But it's the sort of thing that needs to get out there. And, I know that everybody understands that fur comes from animals, right? That's not a secret. But there are those who still choose to wear it as a status symbol, as a luxury item. Um, and I just would like for everybody who believes that fur makes you look good to see where it actually comes from. Because there's absolutely nothing sexy about that. There is nothing fashionable about that. It's just plain brutality.
Yeah, I appreciate you
So,
sharing that. That is tough to hear. And it reminds me of a quote. I don't know if I think I saw it in a documentary, a vegan one. It seems like the quote is, "How does it feel to have a warm neck and a cold heart? Wearing fur. Wearing someone's skin. Of course, it's going to be warm. You're wearing another layer of skin and fur. But there's alternatives. And you also made a point. I was writing things down. I didn't get it written down fast enough, so I'll see if I can recall it. But you talked about some people still view that as a status thing, or luxurious and status symbol and wealth and all that. But man, imagine if we could have compassion equate to positive status and responsibility and luxury and or even wealth or whatever. Like the extent of your compassion is a reflection of your character, and that is perceived in a positive light. And I think we'll get there. I don't know.
We're getting there.
Yeah, I don't know how
it is, but
Yeah.
I'm an activist, so I guess that makes sense. But I do think, we are seeing more compassion, and we are seeing more celebrities, speak out and show their cruelty-free fashions. And yeah, it's definitely a shrinking minority of people who embrace fur. And I think that this is one of those issues that is, I don't want to say easy to win, because there's no such thing as an issue that's easy to win, but it's easier to get people to stop wearing fur than to say, change their entire diet. So it's one of those, nobody needs fur. Nobody says, oh, well, I won't get protein if I don't wear fur, or something silly like that. So, it's a winnable battle. And I think that we are on that final lap right now. And, we just need to keep pushing forward and keep speaking out. And, as I said, most designers have dropped it. It used to be a really big thing for, pretty much every major designer out there. And now, most of them don't use fur. Most of the ones that used to have consciously made a decision to drop it because of the negative publicity. So, we just have to keep that up.
Yeah, and there may be some societal pressures as well. I mean, right now, if you walk down the street holding a bag of food from McDonald's, no one says, "Oh, they don't judge you," and
right.
But the general public often, if they see something that looks like fur, that really is fur or looks a lot like fur, people get a little bit squeamish. They think, yeah, maybe I question that person's integrity or their choice. And I mean, I see that as someone kind of observing things like, I'm not involved in kind of fashion or celebrity stuff or award shows or red carpets, but I see it and I see some of the feedback where even people who would have no problem going to Burger King and buying and eating animals would still have a problem with someone wearing animals. And so
Absolutely.
I think that's what makes it more winnable in my eyes too, is that we're kind of judging people differently from what they eat because most people eat that way, right? Maybe omnivores is 98% of the general population or higher actually globally eats that same way. So if they were to judge that person from eating food from Pizza Hut or Domino's or whatever, they're judging themselves. But if they say, hey, I'm an omnivore, but I don't wear fur, support fur, now they're saying you're doing something that I wouldn't do. And I can kind of hold that judgment on you, I think, where you just wouldn't find that with food, because aside from us and Chef AJ's audience and a small number globally, 75 to 100 million at most, who identify as vegan or live a vegan lifestyle, the 99% of the rest of us don't.
Right.
But something like fur we can get on board with,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge to, convert more people. I mean, obviously more people are vegan now than in the past, and it is a growing movement, but so is the rest of the world population. So, we have to I mean, there's a long way to go, but I'm also very hopeful, and I think that if you count, flexitarians who maybe are still omnivores but are still trying plant-based products, I think the statistics will be a little bit less depressing. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it does seem as though plant-based vegan is becoming more acceptable, despite the long road ahead of us and the very tiny minority that we have, tiny percentage of the general public that we are.
Absolutely, Nina. And I do know the numbers. I wrote about them in my new book. Germany has a meat intake that's an all-time low since the 1970s when they started recording this data. The UK, same thing. Wow. Meat intake is an all-time low since since the 1970s when they started recording this kind of per capita data. In the US, many people are reducing their meat intake. But the thing we're up against is the rise in general population. Population growth is very hard to keep up with, even though we're making incredible strides. So we actually are making incredible forward progress, even on the food front. There are 1,300 companies right now working on alternative proteins, wow. like cultivated meat alone, or precision fermentation. That stat's probably a year or two old. Maybe there's 1,500 to 2,000 individual companies working on that. There's all kinds of behavioral patterns that are changing. National chains that have plant-based food options that did not have before. Everyone from Cracker Barrel to Burger King to many others. So I'm just trying to paint that picture that it is a long way to go. We are a small group, but we have opportunities in front of us, including this area that you're talking about, where some wins are easier to come by than changing an entire worldview or personal habit, including what we decide to eat 3 to 6 times per day.
Yeah, and I also believe that when you highlight any animal issue, you get one step closer to people making other compassionate decisions, I would say. Because when people are paying attention to what happens to animals in some industry, they're going to at some point hopefully start thinking about other industries too. And that's one of the things that I really loved about working on the dog meat trade, and still do, is that I constantly get people saying, I saw your investigation into the dog meat trade and I stopped eating meat. I went vegetarian, or I went vegan. And to me, that just makes it so worthwhile. Because when people are repulsed by cruelty to animals, it does make them think about, the thing on their plate, or, what it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nina, I've got a few more questions here as we kind of wind down the final few minutes, if that's all right. Maybe we'll do like a little speed round. Maybe I do this.
All right, let's do it.
I do this with a lot of my interviews because they are long like this. They're in depth. They're conversational and long-winded, including on my part. But I want to get to some of these. So, what's the best or most rewarding part of the work you do?
The people, getting to see people who care, interacting with people who care as much as I do. Honestly, that's the most rewarding part, being part of a community of people creating real change for animals.
What are the most important issues that you're focusing on right now?
Social media animal cruelty. I know we talked about that really is the most important issue for us right now, and getting stronger legislation to protect all animals at the state and federal level, because without the law on our side, we have nothing.
Exactly. Speaking of law and legislation and lobbying and getting things passed that could literally impact billions of animals, rather than on a one-on-one basis of changing one person's habits, but maybe changing some things system-wide. What are some of your biggest wins at Lady Freethinker?
Yeah, so when we investigated a dog fight breeding facility in Chile, we not only got all of the dogs removed and rescued, but we actually ended up with the strongest animal cruelty sentence in the history of the country, which it was kind of amazing for a small organization. That was one of those moments when I was like, I can really do this. Like, this is working. So that was great. And also working with the BBC on a documentary about the monkey tortures that came out in July, which had the positive effect of getting Parliament to add animal cruelty to their UK Online Safety Act, which just passed and will actually finally hold social media companies accountable for harmful content. So that was kind of a ripple effect that I'm very happy about, because that could have some lasting change in this issue.
That's awesome. I saw you on the BBC, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I watched it a couple times. And great job with that. As I understand it, millions, say it again, millions of people have signed your petitions. 12 million, 15 million. Am I getting these?
I think we're at about 25 now. About 25.
I've got old data.
It's grown.
Old data, Robert. Okay, so 20 million people have signed your petitions. That sounds like a lot of people are interested in helping animals. How describe that briefly in this lightning round? How do you do that, and what does that mean?
It's constantly producing more content and petitions on issues that resonate with me. And the best way to know if an issue is going to resonate with the public usually is if it makes me like just feel something inside. You're like, oh, I have to do something about that. And usually, that gut instinct happens with other people too, and it gets them interested. That and having an amazing team right now. I can't say I do it all myself.
That's 25 million. That's a bigger population than the entire population of most countries. Globally, it's 25 million is more than most countries have as far as the people living there. That's incredible. Just a couple more here, and we'll wrap this up. And I really appreciate your time. What can we do to help right now? People listening, people tuned in, people watching this on the replay, people finding this months from now. What can we do to help what you're doing, or help animals, or help sign petitions, or help be a better voice for the voiceless? What can we do?
Well, please do sign up for our newsletter at ladyfreethinker.org. We also have a tab for petitions, and you can see them and add your signature. It only takes a few seconds. It's a super easy way to add your voice. And if you're already watching, you're probably already interested in vegan choices. And wherever you are on that journey, stick with it. Every meal, every individual choice does make a difference to an animal. And what you do matters. Just remember that what you do matters. It matters to others.
I think that's a great way to wrap up. I do want to give you the opportunity to list any other social media pages, perhaps. We've got your website, ladyfreethinker.org, if I got that right.
Yes.
To subscribe to the newsletter, sign petitions, share the link on your Facebook pages, or Twitter pages, or X pages, or whatever they are.
I still can't say X. I don't know.
Yeah, it does sound. Yeah, share it with your ex. Yeah. So where else can we find you online, and give you a follow on social media, or share what you're doing on social media? How can we stay connected with you that way?
Facebook and Instagram are probably the two best ways. We are on X/Twitter as well. But yeah, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, just Lady Freethinker. We're very easy to find.
Well, Nina, this has been informative. I learned a bunch of stuff. I took a bunch of notes. There's some things that despite being vegan almost 30 years, I did not know about. Including
I'm glad.
Yeah, including some of the work that you're doing with the social media stuff. I think that's hugely important and highly impactful. We know how influential social media is. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in to see this conversation, Vegan Conversations with Robert Cheeke on Chef AJ Live. Again, my host today was Nina Jackel, the founder of Lady Freethinker, the nonprofit organization working to end animal suffering, specifically working with social media campaigns and try to end cruelty on social media right now. I am very impressed with the work that you do, Nina, and I'm grateful for the work that you do, and I'm glad you have that entrepreneurial spirit to be a founder of a nonprofit and to see it through a decade now, and for all these major wins that you just shared about, which got you invited on the BBC and other media outlets to share that with the world. So I want to thank you, and thank you for spending time with me on Chef AJ Live today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing what you do to get the word out and educate people and inspire.
Well, thank you. And we will see you next month on another episode of Vegan Conversations with Robert Cheeke on Chef AJ Live. So check back in next month, and we'll see you then.